Thank you very much, Ines, and thank you all for your presence here today. I have to say good afternoon. Here in Buenos Aires, it's 2 hours afterwards, but I know there's people from other places too. Thank you, and perhaps in any moment of this conversation, I'm going to give you some tips for the Congress and some beautiful things and surprises we will have. So, as I said to Ines, which I thank you a lot for bringing us together today, and I think for your dedicated work with Initiative Toronto linked to the New Lacanian School. I really appreciate that, and I'm happy to be here with you. So let me start with what you said, the title of my From the Mystery to the Secret of the Sexual. And it has to do with my way of entering of our next AMP WAP Congress with the aphorism, there is no sexual relationship. I think that the WAP has given us a very precise challenge. And perhaps we're going to repeat this, but we are supposed not to repeat the aphorism like a sacred formula. We're trying to work with it. We're trying to question it. And so does my text, which I think you have read, and is my attempt, it's an attempt to take the aphorism seriously at almost at least 3 levels, which is the Freudian background, of course, what I would say the Lacanian and Miller's reworking of it, and what we call the Clínico of the 21st century. What? With I mean the 21st century with its gadgets, its new sexual arrangements, and perhaps we can say its old impasses. And I would like to use these 10 minutes Ines proposed me to sketch the path of the text so as to situate its gates, its stakes. So the aphorism names something that it was already at work in Freud, we can say. That human sexuality, that sexuality in human beings never quite fits, never quite works like it should. We have to add that there is always something off or something excessive, something impossible to write as an harmonious relationship. This aphorism reveals that what Freud strives to emphasize, that everything related to sex always falls, always fails. Following from this, Lacan situates failure itself as something that can be defined as sexual in every act of the par lettre, hence its inevitability. This is why Freud indicates slip of the tongue would be nothing other than the sexual act. Why? Because in the sexual act, one of the two is always unsatisfied. This is why analysants never stop talking about it. I think that this mystery is not a theoretical mystery. I think that it's a kind of mystery that touches each speaking being, perhaps in the most intimate way. That's why I spoke about their own conception, their existence, and at the horizon their death. Why? I treat the aphorism not as a final truth, but as a working hypothesis. Because the next the next Congress, or the proposal of the next Congress, is that we don't conserve the formula like a relic. We propose to treat it as an open question to our clinic and what our clinic can test, can nuance or even refute case by case. But of course, the paradox appears immediately. We try to situate the aphorism today in the 21st century, precisely at a time when the master's discourse is mutating very rapidly. If you are reading perhaps the questions that appears on internet by the school, the SF school, we can see what is happening with the new master discourse. And that's why I say it's mutating very, very rapidly, because the master is mutating too. But we run after the present like Zeno's runner after the tortoise. It's always cutting, it's always trying to catch up. And meanwhile, subjects are flooded by images, by series, by disasters, by algorithms. This is very important, by ciphers that pretend to tell them what they desire, or that they don't need another body at all. I think that one of the references I underline in the text is in Lacan's L'étourdi, where he introduces the term stabitat, is a neologism. Is to name the strange habitat of the par l'être, the speaking being. So it goes to try to define, to speak about the world that we live in, the world that arises from the unconscious, that analytical practice makes exist. Because that's true. The unconscious exists because of us, because of the analytical practice. Stabitat is a homophonic condensation of the French c'est habitat. And Lacan adds also in L'étourdi, de l'habiter, from to inhabit. But the word bit in French, in vulgar language, refers to the penis and indicates the presence of the phallic function in the human habitat, which is language. So, Freud's discovery made it possible to deduce that the unconscious is a saying. Something is said without the subject knowing it. And this subject has consequences. I think that it's in relation with that saying, and not to an ideal biology, that Lacan concludes that there is no sexual relationship. While psychoanalysis doesn't recognize a predetermined sexual relationship, biology does. Since something from a woman and something from a man are required for procreation, at least until this moment. Today, it is sufficient for something to be taken from them. Technology can thus compensate and attempt to create a sexual relationship. Furthermore, Do subjects not try to bring about sexual intercourse on the level of meaning? Can we not give sexual meaning to everything we say? This is Freud's hypothesis. Sexuality is the very foundation of meaning, and everything can be interpreted on that basis. But there is a real gap between intercourse on the level of reality and intercourse on the level of meaning. So that's why I can say that the analytic discourse is precisely the place where we try to restore that saying, to let it be heard by its consequences, instead of plugging it with new certainties. Today, however, the places that once offered symbolic consistency, I mean traditions or customs or how things are done, these are today or nowadays full of holes. Holes plugged by what? By objects, by organ objects, gadgets, images, pills, applications, all those that allow for a bond at the level of jouissance without the word needing to count for much. So we have, on one hand, the aphorism, there is no sexual relationship, and on the other hand, another Lacanian formula that has been crucial for our recent work, which is everyone is mad, that is delusional. Between these two sayings, we can situate the knowledge that analysis has produced, a knowledge about the disorder in the real of our epoch, and at the same time a chance to locate, case by case, how each subject invents something with that disorder. I think this is essential. Just to name them, I brought into our minds now, what Freud called cripples of sexuality. I love that formula. I found in one of his texts in 1898, because I love the way he showed how he was sharp with this question. He speaks. I tried to look for it in German, and I found the expression "sexual Krüppeln" in German, which means cripples of sexuality. Freud says it's a brutal expression, and he knows that saying it would be scandalous in his time. He separates what he calls actual neurose, linked to the excess of autoerotic satisfaction, from the psychoneurosis, where he locates a repetition of dissatisfaction, or failed jouissance with the other, the great other. For him, anxiety is libido diverted from its proper use. And in this exploration, he concludes that many of his patients were not simply victims of civilization or heredity, that it was said in those times, but, he says, pardon my words, cripples of sexuality. Cripples of sexuality, that word krüppeln in Deutsch, carries the idea of being maimed, mutilated, bent, condemned to crawl. but also it means a habit that you cannot give up, an excessive jouissance that limits the bond with the other. So it already points to what Lacan will later formalize, that sexuality, far from being a natural harmony, is a field of impasses, addictions, and detours. I recall this Freudian text because I think it anticipates in its own way our contemporary clinic. Our clinic that is, I would say, saturated with compulsions, addictions, sexual practices that leave the subject worse off, more alone, more disconnected from any other who might listen. So the last thing I will introduce now, just to begin our questions and my intention to make a conversation with you, is what I presented in the journée of the École de la Cause Freudienne, that is the question of the symptom as partner. Because I think that it's one of my decisive pivots of the argument, is the syntagm developed by Jacques-Alain Miller, the symptom partner. He began with it, I don't know if you remember when he spoke with Eric Laurent, the other that doesn't exist. And then the next year, he made his course, the symptom partner. I think that is a major find. It's a major find because then in the same text, Jacques-Alain Miller says, to call oneself Lacanian in this sense is always to manage a problem, which is how to articulate libido with the symbolic. How do we pass from the signifier to jouissance? So the symptom is precisely what makes this passage in its own twisted way. If there is no relationship between meaning and the real, the symptom is the exception, is the place where something of a link is forged. So the symptom substitutes for an object that would satisfy the drive once and for all, but such an object does not exist. The drive turns around its object. It is autoerotic, and yet it seeks in the field of the other. Here, the analytic bond itself appears as a symptomatic relationship. The analysant-analyst couple founded on love and supposed knowledge. That is a relationship of words and silences that leaves the sexual outside, even if the whole analysis revolves around the impossibilities of the sexual. Well, just to finish with this introduction, I would like to say the following. That preparing a psychoanalytic congress is not only organizing an event. It is too, of course. But it is always a way of reopening the questions that founded our desire to practice analysis. We bring our signifiers. We bring our readings of Freud and Lacan and Miller, of course, and the very fresh inventions of all our colleagues in the clinic. So that's why my text proposes a path from the mystery, that is the impossibility named by there's no sexual relationship, and ends in the secret, which is each subject invents, hides, or transmits about sexuality in the symptom and in their ways of loving. I suggested to Ines that we have as she said, a conversation all together so as to prepare our questions, to say our answers, to open to new questions, to meet in April in Paris, which is our object today, either in person or via Zoom. Luckily, and I have to say it with a great joy, presential registrations are closed because we have reached the limit of the capacity of the Théâtre de la Mutualité. That means that we are following the registrations by Zoom, and we are very, very happy that we have this method of connecting into all the world, into the world, what we called the world of the WAP. And to hold the Congress all together in Paris with you there or by Zoom. So I hope that's what we are saying today. It's going to contribute to our collective work. And above all, something that might incite you to formulate your own questions, your own findings, and your own ways of saying what analytical practice makes you discover every day. Well, thank you. That's it for instance, for this moment.
Thank you, Ricardo. Yeah. Now, okay, here Federica is going to ask a question.
I cannot listen to you.
Yeah, no. So Federica is going to ask the first question. She's here, so maybe you can see. Okay, okay. No. Okay.
Hi, Ricardo. Here's
Hello.
the question. We agree that the aphorism, "There's no sexual report, sexual relationship," should not be repeated as a mantra, but interrogated and transformed into a work in progress. What is the epistemological and ethical position involved in transforming this aphorism into a work in progress? What does it demand of us?
Yeah. Now I'm going to, okay. So now I'm going to do mine. Yeah. Okay. So my question is about, I think you answered a little bit. I love how this introduction, no? Because my question is about in the aphorism, what is the sexual, no? Because it's like, it seems that it touches all our life, no? But you already said, it was amazing what you just said that I think answered my question, no? That sexuality is the foundation of meaning and can be, and also that what I hear, that it's like it's the foundation of everything, no? It's in the meaning. So because that was my question, no? That when we are in the signifiers, not necessarily is like is the sexual, no? But for instance, when we're trying to match, no? To match things, maybe we're trying to construct the relation, no? But when you said in the section knowledge and belief, no? I thought it was really, well, all the sections are amazing, no? That Lacan, that for Lacan, belief compensates for the absence of the sexual relation, no? It's like the whole that, or the what is the, what the non-existent, then the belief compensate that absence, no? So my question about that would be when you also mentioned that in the Seminar of Psychosis, Lacan refers to the universal belief in Father Christmas, no? And now we are in Christmas, so it's something that is, which implies that tomorrow will be better than today. No? Yeah, sometimes I want to believe that, no? And many times it happens that tomorrow is better than we live, no? But when it was amazing, no? So this belief in Father Christmas is compensating the absence of sexual relation, no? That's a little bit my question. But could we say that the belief in heaven or the afterlife is also compensating for the absence of sexual relation? That's a lapsus, social relation. So because you said that in the mystery, no, when that even affects death, no, all our existence. This is incredible. So if there would be sexual relationship, then we would not need to believe in Santa or in heaven, no. But because it doesn't exist, then we create that belief, no, especially for children or for even us and adults, no. So so what others, because I read in some place that Freud says that sexuality produces a hole in the physical apparatus, no? The sexual relation is a pure real and remains irreconcilable with the subject. So what other things is this, like the sexual is the real, is a real, no? So this part about the belief, no, and the sexuality, I think I would like if you can say something more. And it has to do also with the analytic discourse that you mentioned, that the speaking body will be the real of the unconscious. Wow, when I read that phrase, I said, it's amazing, no, that the speaking being is the real of the unconscious. Because I understood that first it was the subject of the unconscious, but now it's the speaking being or the speaking body, no? So, okay, for now I will leave this in here. So now Patricia will ask. Yeah, you can ask if you want.
Hello. I was reading my question and it is kind of convoluted, so I'm going to summarize it. It's referring mostly to l'étourdi and the idea of this habitat that I would say is immersed in language, but it also kind of touches on la langue. It is there where we get our resources or our resources. And in this context of la langue, you talk about veracities. And this is where I would like us to talk a little bit more. Veracity is a word that is very evocative. You can imagine like these big mouths or these, all the orifices opened and swallowing. And there's a way that we believe that these new gadgets, new things plug, but in your text, veracities also plug the non-sexual relationship. The veracity itself becomes an object. This is kind of like where we went when we were in our group, and we went a little bit mad on the word veracity. It evokes so many things. So call to action and call to question is, can you say more about veracities? Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.
Fabio? Okay.
Hey, so I'm interested in about transference. If we're telling about symbolic transference or the transference to the real, after this question, if the absence of the sexual relation makes discourse necessary, if discourse is a plugin by signification, what kind of bond is that between analysand and analyst, which allows access to the real that establish the incommensurable and unspeakable, located in the symptomatic nature of a relation founded on love and supposed knowledge. So this is speak about transference. I would be interested in the clinical aspect after this. Okay?
Okay, Fabio, I think that we should need a whole Congress to answer your question.
I hope so. I hope so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Andrea.
Hi, Ricardo. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Andrea.
I wanted to ask you more about the real of sex and how is the real of sex related to being crippled by sexuality? I also love this expression, so I know you refer to it in the introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I think now Ignacio or Sanem. Well, I don't see Ignacio, but Sanem, you can.
Yes, Ignacio is in London. He just finished the Freudian field workshop. I was there too. It's 3 in the morning. Anyways, thank you so much, Ricardo. This is very exciting. And my question, I didn't have it written in front of me, but I was actually wondering where the relationship of the aphorism to the clinical practice and to the ethics of psychoanalysis, because you were saying that is the sexual non-rapport at the beginning of analysis, or is it somewhere that we reached through the analytic experience? And I find that question incredibly important because it's also a direction for us, and the direction in the clinic. And are we going to simplify it very crudely, are we going to say that this is our starting point, or this is the point that we reach? And is this where we direct all our cases, I know one by one and in their own singularity, as we always do, but on the other hand, as a general, not a mantra that we repeat, but as a question, as you are saying, as a question that we pose in the Lacanian orientation, because also we say that our clinic is the clinic of the real, and the clinic of the real is the sexual non-rapport. So it is somewhere between like the direction of the treatment and the ethics of our clinic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know, Pechi, are you there? I don't know if Pechi.
Hi, I'm here,
Yeah.
Ines.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ricardo. I'm in Argentina also. So.
Hola.
Hola. Okay, so in your argument, in the section named The Secret of the Sexual, I think, you quoted Lacan, saying that Lacan said, and one of the purposes of the silence, that is the rule of my listening, is precisely to silence love. So I was very interested about this quote, and I would like to ask you if you could talk more about what silence love is. That's it. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, Ricardo, I think you can take the floor.
Take it from there.
Yeah, try.
Okay. I thank you all for these questions, because they're incredible. They go to the point. I think that they touched the real of my own my own research, and as Pechi said, she asked me to talk more. So my intention is to talk more, like what we do in analysis with our patients, make them talk more, say more, or talk more to arrive to the say. And so that's what I'm going to say. I'm not trying to answer the questions, but perhaps answering and opening again new questions. But you made me work a lot. I have to say that Ines is incredible with that, but she made me work a lot. And like we do with our patients. So I am in the state of analysis, and in this moment, trying to know, to see what the other wants from me, Kavoy. And I have just listened to that. I have heard your questions. I did have them written. So what I tried to do was not just to answer all of them or each one of them, but all of them, trying to encounter, to find a way of putting them together so that can be an orientation for me too. I think that all your questions made me, revealed me some new questions I didn't have before. So that's what I'm going to say in this next, I don't know how much time do you have, half an hour perhaps. I will start with a question that made me think a lot, which was the question about, I think it was the question of, sorry, Federica. Yes, Federica. That started with the question of epistemology and ethics. Are you there, Federica? Okay. Well, I think that you remembered perfectly that the question of thing, the aphorism is not to be repeated like a mantra, but as we said, taking us like a work or as a work in progress. This is what I expected too of the organization committee. I asked them, especially for our people that made such a great bibliography. Perhaps you have taken notice of it in the page. And I said to them, this is a work in progress. That means we're not going to close, even after the Congress, these questions about what this aphorism will lead us to, will take us to, because I think it's all the psychoanalysis theory and clinic inside the aphorism. Perhaps I'm too alienated to it in this moment, you can imagine that. And that's why I try to think what position does this question of Federica put us in, or what does it actually ask of us? This is what she asked. And I would say that I'm not an expert in epistemology, of course. I will say it with my own words, simply, that exactly it's what we were saying, that we won't treat this aphorism like a dogma. It's not a dogma. That we shouldn't repeat it as a mantra. And because we need to start everything by questions or questioning. And we don't start from, we already know what this means. Instead, I think that we can start from a position closer to not knowing. It's what Freud demanded us each time to start with a case. Forget what you know. Forget what you know and try to listen and try to be attentive to the words, to see who's speaking there, which language the subject speaks, or what langue the parler is aspired by. So we let each case tell us how this impossibility is played out. Because I think the aphorism becomes something that we test. It's something that gets verified or displaced in the clinic, and not something we impose onto the clinic. And ethically, I think it will ask us always for something stronger. is that we have to resist the comfort of certainty. Because the moment we turn the aphorism into a fixed truth, we stop hearing what is singular in each subject. You said it. So making it a work in progress means accepting that the real, it names the impossibility of the sexual relation and report, and shows itself in very different ways today, and that each subject invents their own way of dealing with it. So I will take especially the question of what does it demand of us? What does it ask of us? And you can imagine that I think that it demands we stay open, that we let ourselves be surprised, including by our own acts. And we don't have to answer it too quickly. It demands that we occupy a position where theory is animated by the case, not the other way around. And I would say that perhaps above all, it demands that we hold a certain courage. I always insist on that, the courage to let the real disturb our knowledge. Like Freud said to his master, like Freud said always, to let the clinic disturb our theories, and let the clinic renew our understanding of this impossibility each time. So it doesn't show the non-sexual relationship report as an event. It shows itself as a structure and as failures, as detours, as inventions. That's where we verify it. How do we verify it? For example, by the impasses of love, of desire, and of jouissance. I think that in every analysis, we encounter the mismatch between what one deserves, or one desires, more than deserves, of what one desires and what one gets, or what one loves. And of course, the jouissance in them, because it's very important for us not to transform this Congress into a Congress of love. You have already had this Congress of Love in the New Lacanian School. So I think that perhaps we have to question, to interrogate the question of the jouissance in love. Or perhaps the jouissance between the partner one, what one wants, and the one that one ends up with, between the fantasy and the body of the other. This is something very, very special. And I think that the no relationship appears in those discordances. And of course, through the symptom as a partner that I have already mentioned, through the singularity of jouissance that I've mentioned and you have mentioned in your questions too, through the failures of discourse, through the invention each analysant can produce, etc. I think this, perhaps in the end of analysis too, we're going to listen to that surely in the Congress. We're going to expect very much about it. So I would say that the aphorism is not today, for example, verified by examples, but by structural misfits. I think that by this, what I call persistent detours, and by the solution that each subject invents to live with an impossibility that cannot be abolished. So that was my first answer, especially direct to Patricia. The last answer will be also specially dedicated, but the rest of them I have made a tour, which is at the tour to try to answer and question myself. So I don't know if I answered your question, Patricia. I can pass to the others. As I said, I didn't take each one, but I took what they said to me in common. Why? First of all, because I wouldn't be able to answer to them. They are very special. They have to be in context, and because I'm not the supposed knowledge, not trying to be, just the director of the Congress. And but yes, I have studied and trying to. Okay. And so stop of justifying Ricardo and go on. In my work, I think that sexuality never appears as a natural function. I have never said so. That would guarantee harmony or complementary between bodies. I think that's the main thing. No guarantee. On the contrary, I think that sexuality is always located on the side of the real. And I mean with that, on the side of what cannot be fully symbolized, regulated, or written as a relation. This is what I think is the precise meaning of Lacan aphorism, which doesn't mean that people don't have sexual encounters, luckily. It means that there is no symbolic formula that could establish a proportion. There is no formula to establish a program for how two modes of jouissance, men and women, should fit together. Beyond the choice of the object, I didn't mean about homosexual or heterosexual or any other way of desiring or jouissance or love. This is why I say that the aphorism concerns not only love and sexuality, but also concept, existence, and death. Because if there is no relation that programs two bodies meet, then there is also no relation. This is very important. There is also no relation, or there is a no relation. As I listened, I heard that in a conversation I had 3 days ago with our colleagues in France, with the ACF, that they pointed out that in RSI, in the seminar 22, Lacan speaks about there is a non-sexual. So, or there is a non-relation. And I say that if there is no relation that programs how bodies meet, there is also no relation that programs how one comes into the world, how one inhabits life, or how one exits it. I imagine you can tell me there are many ways to disagree with this. And I will listen to them because I'm eager to listen to what is happening in this new world, in this new century. And I'm eager to know, to imagine what is going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. But I can say that origin and end are just as ungrounded as sexual compatibility, because there is no natural guarantee anywhere. So I might say that sexuality then introduces a structural disorder into human existence. And that creates urgency. It creates anguish, expectation, disappointment, repetitions. And this is deeply connected to what I developed in my work on urgencies, that the subject is constantly summoned to respond in the absence of guarantee. The subject is constantly summoned to respond in the absence of guarantee. So that means that sexual drives us towards acts. The sexual drives us towards decisions, towards crises, and passages to the act too, precisely because there is no predefined solution. Now, this structural lack opens the door to belief, exactly, Ines. Belief is not primarily a naive error or a cognitive mistake, not at all. Belief is a solution. I think that belief is a solution, a subjective solution to the unbearable openness created by the non-existence of the sexual report. Belief stitches meaning. It stitches meaning onto would otherwise remain a whole, an intolerable whole. This is, I think, why Lacan can say that belief compensates for the absence of the sexual relation, and at the same time that it masks death. Why? Because belief promises continuity where there is none, where I think there is none. It creates the idea that tomorrow will be better, that the other knows, that there is a final reconciliation, perhaps. All our knowledge is a delusion, so I wouldn't say these are different delusions. You've spoken about Santa Claus, and well, Merry Christmas for everybody. That the afterlife too, destiny. We're not for speaking about destiny in psychoanalysis, where we think that destiny can be completely, or what people thinks about the destiny can be completely changed by psychoanalysis. And romantic fusion, even if we say scientific progress, if it is absolutized, I think that it's something that are part of our delusions. They are constructions. Perhaps they are defensive. I can't tell. They are constructions against the real. I read it I liked it very much when I read it in the course of Jekyll and Miller's Silet. They protect the subject from confronting the fact that there is no sexual relation and no final meaning of life or death. So, my answer to the last part of the question, if we stop believing if there were a sexual relation, is this: I think that belief exists precisely because there is no sexual relation. This is my, I wouldn't say certainty, because I am like Groucho Marx. I have my principles, but if you make me change them, I can do it. So, for instance, or just for now, I can say that my idea is that belief exists because there is no sexual report, and is a price that we pay for speaking beings not to collapse under the weight of the real. I shall pass to the questions that had to do with voracities, la langue, the contemporary plugging of the non-report. I went back to L'Etourdi to try to find the paragraph about veracity, the stability, and the body of speakers. I also had the question of Nathalie Lacoeur, that is one of those colleagues that are in front of the blog. I know surely that you have received the blog if you are subscribed to our news report, our newsletter. You are receiving surely the gna gna, which is a beautiful expression. Il n'y a pas, no? Gna gna. That Lacan says in L'Etourdi. And Nathalie Lacoeur has asked me if there was a different translation in Spanish in L'Etourdi, and I said no, it's the same neologism. We have kept the same neologism in French and in Spanish. I don't know in English. I haven't read L'Etourdi in English. The body of speakers is subject to being divided from its organs, says Lacan, exactly in L'Etourdi. Enough so that a function must be found for them. It's amazing to read that. It's very exact, because it's not the other way around. So we are divided from the organs so that a function must be found for the organs. So the organs are by their own. Sometimes Lacan says eras, that means lots of years, century perhaps, are required for this. And he gives the example of the circumcision, the foreskin that acquires use with circumcision, he says, and not the other way. Or the appendix, that he says the appendix wait for the entire centuries of surgery. Thus, in psychoanalytical discourse, an organ becomes the signifier, one that can be said to be isolated in bodily reality as a layer, because it functions there. That means that the function is delegated by discourse. And he speaks about two things. He speaks about the faner, I don't know the translation in English, faneras in Spanish. That the word comes from the French, that had to do with show, with exhibit, what animals and subjects do, and it's something to be shown, says Lacan, thanks to its appearance as a mobile addition that is accentuated by its erectibility. That means the erection of the penis makes the organ to be a fanner, but also to be a hook, where this latter, says Lacan, this is my translation, accent contributes to the various fishing expeditions that make discourse of the voracities with which the non-existence of the sexual relationship is plugged. So, Lacan uses this expression when he speaks of the male organ as an appendix mobile that can fanner. This is to be shown, to be seen, to appear, in a clear reference to its function as a phallic signifier. And when he speaks about the voracities, which is in the same paragraph, that attempts to plug the inexistence, he says, of the sexual report. He's not referring simply to excesses of consumption or moral weakness. I think that voracity names something much more structural, which has to do, I know that, I'm sure that you imagine that I would answer that has to do with the drive-based urgency, the drive that fills the hole opened by the non-rapport. As you can see, in speaking, that the non-rapport makes a hole. And it has to be filled by the drive. When there is no sexual proportion, the subject is tempted to believe that perhaps more will compensate for the lack, more for less, more images, more objects, more partners, more sensations, more speed. So that's why I think that voracity can be thought as a fantasy that in quantity can repair with structure forbids. I don't know if you follow what I'm trying to say. So I did have an example of my clinic, but it's not the moment to say it. Now, this voracity never operates in a raw biological way. It's not like that. It is always articulated by Lalande. So we know that Lalande is not a thing of communication. It's the material through which the subject jouit. I don't know the word also in English because I don't think that we can use the word enjoys, but it has something to do with the pleasure and the jouissance. But I think that each subject plugs the whole. There's a plugging of the whole of the non-rapport with signifiers, with sound fragments of the Lalande, bodily idioms, formulas, perhaps invented formulas, private formulas, repetitions, why not fetishes, that makes sense only for them, for each subject. That's what we call singularity. So voracity is therefore always spoken. It's always, that has to do with language, or if you prefer, with Lalande, encrypted in the singular manner of jouir the language or the Lalande. So we can say that in the contemporary world, this logic has been radicalized. That science, techniques, capitalism are producing an incredible multiplication of objects designed to short-circuit lack. And you have thought about pornography, of course, dating applications, psychopharmacology, digital services, IA, optimizing of performance. These objects are not neutral. They operate as, like, I would say, organ objects. I think that is why we can speak of voracity. They replace the symbolic mediation of the other with direct circuits of satisfaction, and immediate in most cases. There's a question if these veracities foreclosed the no. No, N-O. I think that in many cases, perhaps it does. But they create, because they create the illusion that there is no impossible. They create the illusion that jouissance is limitless, programmable, endlessly renewable. And I think that that's what I'm thinking when I can imagine the next 5 or 10 years, or perhaps less, because they're going to multiply. But I think that this foreclosure never fully succeeds, because there comes a moment of boring, there comes a moment of insatisfaction, there comes a moment of what in French they say ratage, échec, failure. On the contrary, it often produces new forms of anxiety. It produces addictions, which take the subjects to suffering, to mortal things, emptiness, and collapse. So, and these have variations with the structures? Yes, absolutely, absolutely, because perhaps you might. This is something I was thinking after the question, that it's not the same voracity in neurosis, in perversion, or in psychosis. So in all cases, voracity, I would say, is a defense. It's a defense against the non-rapport. It's a defense that never truly heals the wound that tries to cover. And I would like to finish with these answers to what you made me associate. It came to my mind speaking about voracity, and it's what Lacan speaks of the voracious little fish of meaning. I don't know if you remember that in the conference of the symptom in, I think that's there, or in the third, that when he speaks about the subject's insatiable tendency to produce meaning where there is none, that there is an intention, that there is a need to fill every gap with sense. It's an orientation of the subject to interpret endlessly, a delusion perhaps. And the little fish is what Lacan says, it's the meaning itself. The meaning is the little fish which is voracious and it's always hungry. It's never satisfied. The little fish wants more meanings. And it's ready to swallow everything, says Lacan, including the possibility of accessing the real. So I think that this voracious fish swims through our speech, devouring every equivocation by turning it into full closed meaning. And that is what we try to avoid in our practice. It's precisely the opposite of what analytic work aims for. And I think that the task of the analyst is therefore to introduce cuts that prevent the success of meanings from covering over the real that the subject is trying to avoid. That's the importance of the sessions, the variable sessions, or the brief sessions, whatever you want to say. Well, so this is the second answer I have in my mind. I can pass to the third one, which is the one that has to do with crippled by sexuality and the real of sex. Yes, I was also shocked by my finding the expression cripples of sexuality. I loved it, and I was astonished when I read it. I didn't remember it. And it still remains for me like that, because I think it touches something extremely precise. Is that the human subject is wounded. It's something that touches the body, touches the body and the soul, I can say, because sexuality is insufficient, because also sexuality is structurally excessive too. That's why I said that Freud observed that all neuroses had this question of excessive autoerotic, if they are actual neuroses, or the other one that is insatisfaction. But the two of them, in excess of satisfaction or in the lack of satisfaction, they converge on the same point, that jouissance does not integrate smoothly into the psychic economy or into the bond with the one or with the other. It is the one that avoids the contact with the other. So to be crippled by sexuality means that jouissance always leaves a residue that cannot be fully worked through, symbolized or shared. So if you follow what I'm trying to tell you, to transmit to you, is that the subject is always, in one way or another, damaged by jouissance. Either if it overflows the body, or if it withdraws from the body, either it isolates the subject or it entangles them in painful repetitions. So this is precisely what I think Lacan will later formalize as the real of sex. This is what I find, or what I can say today about the real of sex. The real of sex is not the act, it's not the organ, it's not the fantasy. It is the point where jouissance escapes law. We say real without law. Where jouissance escapes measure, where jouissance escapes from reciprocity. It's what makes the sexual report impossible to write. I think that clinically, it means that we don't encounter subjects who simply lack sexual satisfaction. I think that we encounter subjects whose relations to jouissance is always misaligned. Too much, too little, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in the wrong body, with the wrong other. Sexuality never fits cleanly into life. That is what I call the real. This is why in psychoanalysis, sexuality is never a problem among others. It is the place where the subject's division, their solitude, and their dependence on objects become most visible. The subject is not handicapped despite sexuality. The subject is structurally handicapped by being a speaking being who has a body that jouit. Well, that will be the third answer to my question. Perhaps I'm trying to satisfy you. I know that I will not satisfy you or will not satisfy you completely, but we always have this proposal. I continue with the fourth, which I called the hikikomori forced reports and contemporary defenses. You all know what hikikomori phenomenon is. It has been studied by our Lacanian orientation many years ago, but what I have seen looking up for this in Wikipedia, for example, in Wikipedia, that there is still in 2025 many people in the world that are in this kind of hikikomori way of living, which is the global isolation. That which was a syndrome, a cultural syndrome exclusive in Japan or to Japanese. Now it has passed to the rest of the world, like the corona. And I've read that there is also hikikomori people in Spain, in Korea, in Italy, in France, and even in Argentina. I didn't know that. Of course, the phenomenon has increased because of the pandemic. The ways that the IA are trapping people, all of us, with the ChatGPT, and which is not a moral problem. It's a problem of letting us a little bit isolated from the others, and especially from the encounter with the bodies of the others. So hikikomori, that is the people that stays at home with the computers or playing video games or whatever, many times avoiding going to eat or to the bathroom, many of them probably psychotics. We can see that this is a contemporary scene that may confront us with two opposite phenomena. On one side, we can see a kind of, in my opinion, of course, an obsessive attempt to make the sexual relation exist through objects, images, algorithms, and direct stimulation. On the other side, we see radical withdrawals from the social, leaving the social, and the sexual bond. As I said, the phenomenon of hikikomori, or just people, young people included, isolated from sexual courses. At first glance, one seems to affirm sexuality without limits, while the other seems to negate it entirely. But I think that in structure, both are responses to the same impossible. That the forced report, for example, for pornography, virtual partners, performance culture, pharmacological enhancement, attempts to eliminate the uncertainty of the other, what we call the desire of the other, what we call the jouissance of the other. It promises jouissance without risk. It promises jouissance without misunderstanding, without waiting, without rejection. The other is refused to a function, an interface, a programmable surface. This is the fantasy of a sexual report without alterity. That's why I liked the question about hikikomori, because it represents the inverse strategy. Since there is no sexual relation, then I withdraw from the field of the other altogether. The subject chooses isolation as a way of isolating or avoiding the confrontation with the impossible. Here, instead of saturating the whole with objects, the subject empties the scene of the other. I think that these two solutions mirror each other. They can confront each other, but they look at each other. One attempts to erase lack through excess. The other tries to erase lack through disappearance. I think that both testify to the same structural truth, that the subject cannot invent a stable place in the sexual bond. I think that that is why what is today is the new thing that makes us think of that it's not the logic of the defense, but I would say that I think this happens in a massive scale. We speak one by one, but I think this happens massively. I think that never before have subjects such power or such powerful means to avoid the body of the other, either by replacing it with objects or by erasing the other body entirely from their daily life. So that for psychoanalysis, this poses a crucial question. This is, how can a speaking body still consent to encounter another speaking body when technology offers so many ways to bypass the real of the encounter? Well, I finished my answer with a question. So I will pass directly. We have time, Ines, don't we? Or you want to make a pause? I don't know. You're mute.
We have time. We have time.
I can go on.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this is the half part of what I have prepared for answering your questions. Tell me if you are bored, if you want to have to drink a coffee, or okay. Then we go to the fifth answer, which is the axiom, or if it is an axiom or point of arrival. And I will speak also about the ethics of psychoanalysis and the direction of the treatment. I think one of the most decisive questions raised by the aphorism is the question that I made, and I think that it was Peichi that followed my question. That is, if it is like an axiom or a point of arrival. Is it so?
I think
No,
not me. I did the
not you.
hikikomori question.
You went to the hikikomori.
It was
Yeah,
me,
you're right.
Ricardo.
It was Sanem. Yes,
yes.
It's right. Sorry. Okay. Let's say that I think that this is, I would say that it's crucial. This is a question that is crucial for the ethics of psychoanalysis. Because I think that for the analyst, there is no doubt the non-existence of the sexual relation is an axiom. We part from that. It is a structural premise. It's not a personal belief. But it's something which is used for us or by us to operate with. We operate knowing that no symbolic harmony between bodies, between jouissance, or between subjects can be established once and for all, and which is not a pessimistic solution. I think I would say it's a position of rigor. Why? Because I think that it prevents the analyzed from promising reconciliation. It prevents, it avoids to promise complementarity or to promise a resolution of the sexual impasse. It's a kind of relief too. But we have many demands on it, especially today, in these days, that people are used to ask the ChatGPT for their personal questions, and they take many of us analysts as ChatGPT, which is a very great problem too. But I spoke about the analyzed, but for the analysand, things are entirely different. That's why I said, because no one comes to analyze saying, I suffer because there is no sexual relation. Subjects arrive with concrete complaints. Failed love, unbearable separations, repetitive choices, sexual inhibitions, compulsions, humiliations, betrayals, impotence, addiction, devastating passions, and etc. You can complete the list if you want. In all these forms, the subject still believes explicitly or not that a different partner, or perhaps a different choice, or a different version of themselves could finally make the relation work. It might happen that a different person might end the problem. It happens. But during the work of analysis, I can listen to Sanem's differences if you have. What brings the subject into analysis is not the knowledge that the sexual relation does not exist, but the experience of the failure, many times lived as a personal catastrophe. This is where I've seen many times in my urgency experience that this becomes relevant. Because the subject is pushed by a point of impasse that no longer tolerates to postpone. But even then, the subject still believes in a solution at the level of the other. So I think that the analytic process gradually displaces this position, by which means, of course, through interpretation, repetition, transference, cuts on the work, on the symptom, What begins as a contingent failure comes to be recognized as a structural impossibility, the path from impotence to impossibility. This is not a theoretical realization, it is an existential one. Something shifts when the analyst stops asking why this fail again. And when the analyst begins to encounter the fact that there is no formula that could ever make it succeed completely. This is why I insist that for the analysand, the non-rapport is a point of arrival. It is not imposed from the start as a doctrine. It is reached through a series of disillusions that are not cynical, but structural. It can leave a rest of cynism. Because the subject discovers, not without pain, not without resistance, that the other cannot guarantee the relation, any. So that's why I say that this has ethical consequences. Because as long as the subject remains caught in the fantasy that sexual rapport could exist, they remain in a position of demand. A demand of recognition, a demand for reciprocity, a demand for proof, a demand for repair, many demands. It's why this is the way the subject makes exist the other. The other is constantly summoned to answer for what structure cannot provide. That's why I say the subject makes exist the other. When the non-rapport becomes assumable, not as a catastrophe, but as a condition, this demand can be transformed. The subject will no longer be waiting for the other to complete them. It is amazing, but we can see this also in our colleagues, very well analyzed, that don't stop with our demands, which is completely natural, of course. It's a joke. But I would say that what appears instead is a different relations to jouissance. This is the jouissance that can be recognized as singular, not guaranteed, not shareable in proportion. I think this is where the clinic of the late Lacan, which is often called the clinic of the real, starting from the 11th century, but especially from the 20th seminar, becomes decisive. Because it's not a clinic orientated by ideals of harmony, adaptation, or normalization. It is a clinic orientated by the impossible, by what cannot be resolved, but can perhaps be handled differently. And now comes the question about transference, because it affects the question of transference. Because at the beginning of analysis, transference is still tied to the belief that the analyst knows the secret of the relation, that the analyst could indicate the path toward a successful sexual or amorous loving solution. But if the treatment progresses, transference itself is transformed. The analyst will be no longer situated as the one who can guarantee the relation, but as the one who maintains open the place for the impossible without filling it with illusion. I think that in this sense, to say our aphorism is not close to the horizon of analysis. It is to open it. It opens a space where the subject can invent something new, not a solution to the impossible, but a singular way of living with it, without demanding to the other abolish it. I think that not trying to search an ideal way. We don't live without ideals, but they are not so pushing us. From this perspective, I have to say that the end of analysis is not a moment of reconciliation with the sexual relation, but a moment where the subject can finally say in one way or another, it does not work, and yet I can live with that. So then that is my answer to your question. Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, son. So, I don't know if Ines is on the screen.
No, this has been, yeah, this has been a banquet, un banquete.
Okay.
No, it's amazing.
Shall I go on?
Yeah.
My sixth answer to the question has to do with the symptom as partner and the reconstruction of the other at the level of jouissance.
Yeah.
I think I said before that this contribution of Jacqueline Miller to contemporary Lacanian clinic is this formulation of the syntagm partner symptom. In my own work, this notion resonates deeply with what I have developed around the act urgency, especially that, and the solitude of speaking being. Because the symptom is not longer conceived merely as what must be interpreted as dissolved or what have to be dissolved, but what organizes the subject's singular mode of jouissance and the possible bond with the other. So if Lacan affirms that there is no sexual relation, it doesn't mean that subjects live without bonds. We have the proof here, even it's, I remember what Jacqueline Miller said to the Russians. He said, "J'adore le Zoom." I don't know if you remember that. I also adore the Zoom. I love the Zoom because I can have the chance to be in the middle of the summer with you in Canada, not with Peichi, all in summer, and you in the cold winter there in Canada. So I love the Zoom. And well, I've already said that I don't want to repeat that subjects form couples. They do form couples. They form couples and they have attachments, passions, dependencies. So the question that comes to us is, what kind of bond is this, if it is not grounded in a sexual relation? And Miller's answer is radical. What holds the couple together is not complementarity, but the compatibility of symptoms. So the symptom is not a simply defect or a malfunction. It is a solution, albeit a costly one. It costs a lot, the symptoms. It is the way in which each subject manages to localize their jouissance, to give it a place, a rhythm, a limit. In this sense, the symptom functions as a border between the body and language, or la langue, between the speaking being and the excess that inhabits them. When I say that the symptom becomes a partner, I mean that the subject doesn't only suffer from the symptom, they can also learn on it. This is the news. These are the news. The symptom stabilizes something of the subject's relations to jouissance. It allows jouissance not to invade everything. At the same time, it is through the symptom that a minimal form of relation to the other becomes possible. That is where the later formulation becomes crucial. The later formulation of Lacan becomes crucial. Because if there is another at the level of jouissance, it is only reconstituted at the level of the symptom. So the other is no longer the symbolic other of law, speech, or guarantee. It is a fragile, precarious other, reconstructed locally, case by case, through the way the subject binds their jouissance to some figure, some body, some scene. The other is no longer universal. It becomes idiosyncratic, one by one. So, I will begin to make shortcuts because otherwise you're going to be night already. So I think that analysis does not aim to liberate the subject from the symptom if it was possible, which is not, which is not desirable too. The aim is rather to make this symptomatic bond legible, so that the subject can recognize how they use the other in order to sustain their jouissance, how their jouissance is turned, shapes the others, the choices of others. That's why I'm trying to find my research relevant in this particular subject, because it's when the subject reaches a moment where the symptom no longer operates as before. There is a change in the symptom. And this change, this moment of change, many times provokes a subjective urgency during the treatment. It happens before the treatment. It might happen in the moment of ending the treatment. There is always urgency in the beginning, during the treatment, and in the end. Because those are moments where the familiar supports of jouissance falter, fail. They are moments where anxiety emerges, not because there is too much sense, but because there is too much real. It is at this point that an act may take place, not as a solution, but as a cut in the repetition. Thus, the partner symptom is not simply a descriptive category. It is an operator. It is a dynamic operator in the clinic. I think that allows us to think love, separation, jealousy, violence, tenderness, and devastation not as accidents of psychology. They are effects of how Juisan finds or fails a partner, to find a partner. So finally, this approach also transforms our conception of the end of an analysis, which is a theme I will not progress in this moment. I will make a bypass, a court circuit, and I will not speak of courtly love, because I think I have already spoken a lot about this subject. But I'm watching the watch, that's why I look for my right. I will speak about the secret of the sexual, generalized semblance. I don't know if you speak of semblance or make-believe, and the social bond. Yes, in the final part of my text, I propose a shift from the mystery of the sexual to its secret. The mystery refers to what remains enigmatic, what resists knowledge. The secret, however, refers to something more precise. It's a knowledge that exists only by being veiled. The secret is not simply what is hidden. It is what must remain partially hidden in order for the bond to exist. Sexuality, in this sense, always contains a dimension of secret, not only because I wouldn't say it is forbidden, it was forbidden, but because jouissance cannot be fully exposed without being degraded or destroyed. There is something of jouissance that cannot be said, shown, or shared entirely without losing its subjective consistency. That's why I invoked Jorge Luis Borges, The Sect of the Phoenix, that Jacqueline Miller treated in one of his courses. We can say that Lacan links the question that the secret is not behind speech. It is embedded in speech itself. That's why he links this directly to his own practice when he says that one of the goals of analytic silence is to silence love. Now I'm responding, I'm answering to the question of love and silence. This doesn't mean to extinguish love as an effect. It means to avoid betraying it with too much sense. Love, like sexuality, collapses when it is over-explained, over-moralized, or over-idealized. I think that the analyzed silence protects the secret dimension of jouissance from being suffocated by meaning. Now, what changes in our contemporary world is not the structure of the secret, but the status of the semblance that surround it. We live in an era of generalized semblance, identities, sexual positions, modes of jouissance, and nominates proliferate in public space. Everything is said, everything is named, displayed, claimed, and exhibited. At first glance, it might seem that the secret has disappeared, but it is an illusion. What has disappeared is not the secret, but the artifice that protected the secret. Jouissance is now exposed directly, without distance, without ritual, without delay. Pornography is the clearest example. It shows everything, and precisely because it shows everything, it doesn't touch anything of the secret. This produces a transformation of the social bond. When semblance no longer circle the hold, but attempt to feel it directly, the bond loses the elasticity. The demand for rights, for recognition, for naming, which I absolutely support. The demand for visibility, which I say I legitimate in all respects, but all risk becoming a new way of denying the impossibility at the heart of the sexual relation. Jouissance can be treated as if it were generalizable. That is the problem. That is the problem, that jouissance is tried to be absolutely communicate and standard and being standard. It's against this background, I think, that Lacan's statement that the real of the social bond is the inexistence of the sexual relation takes on its full weight. The bond does not collapse despite this inexistence. It is structured by it. Attempts to erase it, to normalize it, or to being legislated at the level of semblance, which always produce new forms of violence and exclusion and segregation. For psychoanalysis, the task remains unchanged, but becomes more difficult to maintain a space where the subject can approach the secret of their jouissance without being forced to exhibit, to justify it or normalize it. The analyzed shall not reveal the secret. The analyzed protects the place where the secret can be approached without being destroyed by sense. This is what allows the subject not only to speak about sexuality, but to encounter what in their sexuality resists both knowledge and exhibition. Well, that is my response to love, silence. And Ines, I still have a bonus track.
Okay, that's great.
I still have a bonus track. Because I don't know if Peichi can be satisfied with my answer, but
yeah, thank you. Thank you a lot.
But I would say that the bonus track is that Lacan says that we, in analysis, we must keep love in silence because love is essential for the process. But it's also dangerous if we start talking about it too much. Love is what brings the subject to speak. This is what we call the transference. But if the analyst responds to that love, interprets it, or even acknowledges about it too directly, the analysis slips into suggestion. So the analyst becomes someone who knows, someone who completes the subject, and that is a way to kill the operation. So by keeping love silent, the analyst protects something fundamental, what we call the desire of the analyst, which is not, as you know, a personal desire, but a position, a structural position obtained by our own analyze. And we refuse to enter the imaginary game of reciprocity. Silence keeps a distance that allows something else to be heard, not the love story, but what the subject's love is actually saying about their jouissance. So, this is the bonus track, because the point is simple. Love must be there, but it must not be handled. It must work, but it must not be fed. Silence is what prevents love from covering the real, the impossibility of sexual relation, and allows the subject in analyze to discover their own way of dealing with that impossibility. Okay, now it's all.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I wish we would have more time for the people to participate here, but well, it was really amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
We'll discuss in Paris.
Yeah, we'll discuss in Paris.
Yes, that's the idea. So members or non-members of the school are all invited to be there and to discuss, especially in the clinical moments.
Yeah.
Remember that we have 2 days of clinical presentations that everybody can be there, I mean, in presence or by Zoom. You can also make questions or receive answers or make critics or whatever. So we are going to give this a kind of a new formula that we haven't made before, that is to participate from the Zoom too. So as I said in Paris, we want you. We want you there.
Yeah. Yeah. I will be there in person, but I hope many people. Yeah. Federica too. Yeah.
Well, but if you're by Zoom, you're very welcome.
Everyone will be on Zoom. Yeah, the Zoomers.
Zoomers, exactly. We expect the Zoomers.
Yeah. Thank you.
In the Paris springtime.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Really.
Spain.
Thank you so much, everyone, and especially Ricardo. Yeah, I know. Sorry to make you work.
No, I loved it. I have my work done already.
Yeah.
So thank you,
Thank
Ines.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Yes.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year too. Ciao.
See you next year.
Ricardo. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
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 Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, they were like